Today we're making docks and piers. Some assembly required. Welcome to another episode of the GameSmith, and in today's episode I'm going to turn some dollar store wooden craft supplies into a wharf or a pier or a dock, depending on how you use it. I decided our docks are going to be made with actual wood. We'll start with different diameter dowels that I found at the dollar store. We're going to use these as our wood pilings or our mooring poles to hold our piers and docks upright. I want to texture the dowels with a wire brush in order to give them a more tree-like appearance. If the brush doesn't create the texture you want, try using another tool such as a fine saw blade or very coarse sandpaper. I'll use this dollar store miter box in order to guide the cutting of our dowels. I want different lengths so that I can cluster them together as our mooring posts. I like the look of several dowels clustered together so that it looks like the poles have been repaired several times. I'm going to use some sandpaper to smooth out the ragged edges of the dowels. We don't need the ends to be perfectly smooth, but I don't want them to be a jagged mess either. There are several types of glue that we can use to bond our wooden parts together. Wood glue is the most obvious. Elmer's carpenter glue is the best, but it can be a bit pricey. The Craft Melody woodwork glue that I found at the dollar store is also good. However, PVA glue and rubber contact cement also work. I'm going to use the Craft Melody woodwork glue first. I've had this bottle for a few years and it's congealed a bit, which actually helps me apply it to the dowels. As I mentioned earlier, I want the mooring posts to be different sizes. I want to create asymmetrical steps with different diameter dowels. I'm constructing 5 piers, so I'll need 4 of these structures for each of them. That'll give me plenty of opportunity to experiment with different patterns. Next, we'll use these coffee stir sticks that I found at the dollar store to build a frame and a walkway for our pier. I have 2 different sizes and thicknesses. I know that bamboo is not wood, technically it's a grass, but I'm calling it wood for this build. Each pier needs 2 main supports in order to hold the walkway deck. I'm going to use some Elmer's wood glue in order to affix 2 stir sticks together. To make sure they bond, I'll use these small binder clips in order to hold the sticks in place. I need to make 5 pairs of these as well. Now that our frame beams are dry, we need to remove the binder clips. Now we're going to glue our cross beams to our mooring poles. We need to decide how high off the build surface we're going to be gluing our beams to our moorings. I've decided that the height of a dice container lid, which is about 15 millimeters or half an inch, will work just fine. I've also decided that I want the mooring poles about 2.5 centimeters or an inch from each end. I don't need the measurements to be exact, and I can eyeball the placement based upon the grid on my cutting mat. Once we have the estimate of the placement of all our parts, we add the glue and put it all together. The Elmer's glue has a good working time so we can make corrections, but the total dry time is about 24 hours for a secure bond. It's the dry times that may challenge the patience of crafters, but it's worth it. While the frames are drying, I'm going to make the deck planks. We could use a wire brush or the teeth of our saw in order to mark up our planks. I like the saw texture on the bamboo sticks more than those made by the wire brush. I've textured a whole bag of bamboo stir sticks, but I only textured one side. Now I have all our parts that I need to make our piers. All the glue is dry, parts textured, and cut to size. To scale, this pier will be about 20 feet or just over 6 meters across. I need to glue my deck planks onto the frame at the correct width. I'm going to start at the end of our pier. To cover the ends, I'm going to create an L-shaped plank. I need only glue the long edges of the stir sticks together and place them at the end of our dock. I can apply the glue to the support beams and lay the planks across them. I can cut the ends of the planks into irregular shapes so the pier looks worn. I can also cut out gouges on the long edges of the planks in order to show wear and tear. I don't want the planks to be pressed together too tightly. I want some space between them. Some of the gaps can be smaller than others, some of them can be larger, but I don't want them to be too big either. After all, we have to remember that we're building for a 28mm scale miniature. While it's fun to add texture to the planks by gouging them, it doesn't hurt to have several of them unblemished. We also have to cut several planks to the size of the frame since the walkway narrows at the mooring poles. As we're putting the last few boards in place, I thought I'd remind you that I'm making 5 of these, and this is the largest. Here's a look at our completed pier, and now all we need to do is let the glue cure for 24 hours before we move on. I think these textured stir sticks look great. A quick side note, I've been collecting all my scraps of wood that have been cut or broken off. You'll want to keep these bits and pieces because we're going to use them in a future build. Don't worry about the shapes and sizes, we'll deal with that when the time comes. Next, I found some cheap wood stain at the local hardware store. This 236ml can is about 8 ounces of stain, which is more than enough to complete this and many more projects. Of course, you don't have to use wood stain, you could also use brown acrylic paint or even brown washes to color your wooden pier. I don't recommend that you stain each piece separately. Stain the entire completed project instead. I put down a thick paper work surface in order to reduce the mess. Now I'm going to be treating this stain more like a paint than a stain. After I load the brush, I'll remove a lot of the stain on my paper before I apply it to the pier. This will give me more control over the thickness of the stain that I apply. I want the mooring poles to be darker than the deck planks. Make sure that you cover all the surfaces and the nooks and the crannies and the spaces between the deck planks. While the stain is still wet, we want to use a dry rag in order to wipe the stain off the pier that the wood hasn't absorbed. Drag the rag in the direction of the grain in order to remove the excess. We want the stain to dry in the wood, not on top of it like paint does. When this step is done, we'll set the build aside and let it dry for at least 4 hours. At this point, if you want the stain to be darker, you can add another coat. Also, because I'm not wiping the stain off the mooring poles, I'm confident that I'll get the final result that I want. I found the best way to complete a project of this size is to do it in stages. Because of the cutting and texturizing and dry times of the glue and stain, I had to plan out when each step had to be completed. There was a lot of downtime when I could work on other steps or even other projects. I did all the cutting at once, the gluing at once, and all the staining at once. After all, I am making 5 of these piers. While I've enjoyed working on this project, the dry times really did drag out the length of the build. I could have accelerated the build by changing my materials, but I really wanted to make these piers out of wood. Now that the stain is dry, we can leave our piers as they are, but I'm going to add a tan dry brush. We want to load our brush with very little paint and remove the excess on our napkin. Now with very little paint on our bristles, we can lightly drag our brush against the grain of our build. We don't want the paint to get down between our surface textures, we only want the paint on the high ridges of our planks. Here's a close-up of the contrast between the dry brush side and the other side without the dry brush. I'll put a link in the top right corner to our Foundations video on dry brushing. That video covers the topic quite extensively. And here's the final product of our dry brush. I completely ignored the underside of the pier since it won't be seen at the table. Next, I have a ball of twine and we're going to add some accents to our piers. We're going to mix some PVA glue and water in a small container. The exact measurement isn't important, but as you can see here, I have about a 60-40 mix. It's important to make sure that the water and the glue are thoroughly mixed together. We don't want to have any little clumps of glue in our mixture. Now we cut a length of twine and drop it into the glue mixture. Mix it around to thoroughly soak the string. You want it to be completely saturated. Then we remove the excess glue as we remove it from the tray. We can start by sliding one end of the string between the slats or wedge it between 2 pieces of wood. We then tightly wind the string around the wood poles. You may want to press the string together so it has a tight coiled appearance. You can attach the end by pushing the string into another crease or behind the rope, or even add a bit more glue in order to hold it in place. You may have to keep your finger on the string for a minute until the glue grips it firmly. You can add more rope under the pier or leave it as it is. Finally, we can add a couple of accessories to help sell our piers. We can make coils of rope by soaking some string into our glue mixture. We need only wrap the rope around our finger and stack the twine on itself. The glue in the rope will hold it in the shape that you coil it into. And finally, make sure that your rope coils dry on a non-stick surface. Because of the modular nature of our piers, we can create all manner of configurations at the game table. As always, you should alter the details of the build to your own preferences. I toyed with the idea of adding a wash to some features, but I decided against it. I also decided against gluing the rope coils and crates to the piers in order to allow more versatility. If you'd like to support what we're doing here at the GameSmith, please hit the subscribe button. If you're already a subscriber, please hit the thumbs up button and leave a comment. You might also check out our blog at thegamesmith.org. We post the building materials for all our crafts on our website too. You might also check us out on Facebook, Pinterest, and Instagram. Until next time, I'll see you at the table.